What's up? Good morning. Happy Monday. Another beautiful week for building. I'm excited. So I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. And this is going to be the first video of a 3-part kind of series, if you will. So today what we're going to talk about is self-leadership. And then next week, I'm going to talk about team leadership. And then 2 weeks from now is going to be the third part. And we're going to focus on organizational leadership. And so briefly, I'll explain how does one transition to the second and then eventually to the third. Because we all start at self-leadership and then move to team and then eventually organizational. So we'll talk about that. But for this video, I'm very excited. So we're going to talk about 5 main things. And this applies to everyone in their life, in their career. Like every single person needs to rely and think through these 5 pieces of leading ourselves. So we're going to cover personal vision, personal standards, personal qualities, and within personal qualities, we're going to talk about courage, discipline, faith, and patience, and why all of us need to cultivate those. We're not born with them. We need to build them. And then we're going to talk about iterative evolution and persistence, and I'll talk about what does that mean. And then the final part is internal motivation and resilience, which is going to be crucial for all of us, especially in our careers, but then also relationships. So with that, let's get started. So before we dive into the 5 parts of self-leadership, I want to first lay the foundation of understanding of why we need to first talk about self and then eventually team and then organizational. Because this is going to be a process that all of us will move through, assuming that we continue to grow and develop within our professional lives and careers. So the very first part is knowing that when we start our careers, when we're young, when we're building skills, knowledge, experiences, we always start as a contributor. And that is the very first way that we're able to add value, is we're usually the ones doing things. We're told what to do or how to do it, or we're given something and say, all right, figure out how to do that. And so at the individual level, and that's why it's called individual contributor, but you're on a team, there's going to be a manager and there's going to be other people, and you're one of the people on the team contributing in some way. It could be a marketing team, a finance team, accounting team, operations team. It could be any type of a graphic designer or a design or talent team. So it's whatever it is, you are contributing to the team with your tasks. And at that level, when we are individual contributors, we need to master self-leadership, because that is how self-leadership is what gets us to become a manager. And managers then have to figure out how to do team leadership. And once they master team leadership, only then can they then reach the third level of visionary. And at the visionary level, we must be able to do organizational leadership. And so within any business or any organization, any institution, wherever there's a common goal and many people within it, there's going to be these 3 levels within the organization or institution or business. So there's going to be individual contributors who are the ones doing everything. Then there's going to be the managers helping organize and make sure that everyone is doing the right thing and everyone's moving in the same common direction. And really, the manager's job is to take strategic initiatives from the visionary. So if we were to use a corporation for an example, think of the visionary as the C-suite team. They're the ones setting objectives. This is what we're trying to achieve in the next 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, etc. They're creating strategic initiatives. The managers are the ones receiving these and figuring out, okay, how are we going to make this happen? And then divvying it out into the individual contributors who are the ones moving the boat forward. So I wanted to set this up first so you can immediately kind of picture and visualize why it is that we're talking about part 1 and then part 2 and then part 3. So with that, let's dive into part 1, self-leadership. So the first part of self-leadership is knowing and having a vision for our own lives. And the reason this is so important is if we cannot set a vision and a course for our own lives, how are we ever supposed to do it then for a team or eventually for an organization? So it needs to begin with us at our own individual level. And so I want to very briefly kind of break down a quick framework that you can begin to think about how could I set this vision for myself in the most important parts of my life. So the very first part is knowing that there are going to be 3 main time frames that I encourage you to begin thinking through for your own life, your career, your relationships, really all these most important parts of our lives. And we'll get there in a second. But in terms of time frames, think of it as you want to start with a long-term vision. And you can think of a long-term vision as 10 years or 15 years or 20 years from now. And I'm sure, maybe what's going through your head right now is, all right, that's insane. That's absolutely ridiculous. Why would I try to figure out what my life will look like 15 years from now, 20 years from now? Too much is going to change. Politics, economies, technology, companies, families, relationships, so much is going to change. Yes. But there's only two ways that those things are going to change. One is either by a reaction to circumstances. So things happen and then we react to them. Or the second way is we build them. And so there's only two ways our future will happen. We either react to circumstances or we proactively build them. And so that is why we need to start with a long-term vision, because if we don't know what that is, we cannot possibly build it. We're just going to, wherever the river takes us is where we're going to end up flowing. And so we need to start with, what do I want my life to look like? Because that is what I'm going to build. And the metaphor I like to use is, think of this as a skyscraper. We cannot build a skyscraper in a day, a week, a month, a quarter, a year. It's going to take a long time to build this thing, but we'll never eventually build it unless we get started knowing and blueprinting out what we want that thing to look like. So first, set the long-term vision. And then what we want to do is reverse engineer backwards to figure out, okay, if that's where I want to end up, then where should my life, career, relationships, all these things that are important to me, where should I be in 3 years? And the reason we want to start long-term and then work our way backwards is because then we have a direction. We know, okay, in 3 years, if I'm here, that is going to be on path in the right direction towards the long-term vision. And then we want to do one step further, reverse engineering backwards to eventually 12 months. So what am I absolutely committed to making happen in the next 12 months? And the way that I like to differentiate between a goal and a commitment is a goal. Goal setting has become cliche now, where people think about goal setting and this, in their mind, goals equals shoulds. It's, oh, I should do that, or I want to do that. But it's oftentimes not an absolute resolve of doing the thing. It's not a full-blown commitment. And so when we call these commitments, what we're doing is we're reminding ourselves that, hey, I committed to doing this. It's not a want, it's not a baby, it's not a should. It's happening. It's done. I can already see it as done in my mind 12 months from now. So these are the three time frames I would encourage you to think through for your lives. And then the next part is understanding that we're going to have multiple different parts of our lives that we need to think through, that we kind of want to create these three different time frames for. And so this is in no order of priority, but this is not, I would say that these are a good holistic understanding of the most important pieces of our lives. But we have our life, our professional career, health, relationships, finances, and spirituality. And you can think of those as kind of, if you were to draw a circle and then divvy it up, like our life is going to have all these different sections, but we need to be able to think through, what do I want to achieve in my life in all these different sections? And then you're going to go through the individual goal setting or commitment setting for that. And then the final part is understanding values and priorities. Now, values sound kind of abstract, like, all right, well, what are my values? What are my beliefs? But the reason these are so important is it's a filter through which we can make decisions. And the reason that's kind of in terms of priorities is, how do we know what to prioritize if we don't know what we deeply value? And so that is also why when we're thinking through our personal vision for our life, especially long-term, we need to know what is most important to us. And when we know what's most important to us, it becomes extremely easy to set priorities. So that's personal vision. All right, so now the second part is personal standards. And you can think of personal standards as rules that we've created for ourselves in all of the different areas of our lives, in our personal lives, our professional lives. And the reason standards are so important is it's what drives our subconscious operations. It's how we make decisions. We'll talk about, it's our behavioral patterns and habits. And so these fundamentally, the standards that we set for ourselves are what determine our lives. And if they're very low standards, then ultimately we're going to have a very low life or a very low career. We're not going to be achieving what it is that we ultimately want. And so another way to think about it is we have our ideal self, our kind of our dream self. And then we have our actual self. And there's a huge difference between our actual self and our ideal/dream self. And the only way to ever bridge that gap is by consistently increasing our standards. So who we are today, we will always fall to our lowest standards. Because yes, some days we're going to go above and beyond, but then other days it's kind of like we fall back into routine. And whatever our routine is that is our standards. And so the way that we can think about standards is there are absolutes. I absolutely must have or do XYZ. And when we try to create standards, really what we're telling ourselves is we're changing the rules for how I'm choosing to live my life. So whenever we change a standard, we're changing a should into a must. I should do this is now going to be I must work out 3, 4, or 5 times a week. I must prepare X number of days ahead of my meetings or presentations. I must at least stay in touch with this specific person 3 or 4 times a week or 2 to 3 times a month. So whatever area of your life it is, it's figuring out what are the rules that I'm currently living by, because those are my current, that's how I became who I am today. And then we want to ask ourselves, if we want to improve ourselves, how are we going to increase the rules, increase our standards? So how this all works out is we have behavioral patterns and habits that we do. And if we try to change a behavioral pattern or try to change a habit, it takes a lot of conscious thought and focus initially in the short term in order to do that. Well, way back when, years or decades ago, we started doing things a certain way. And after we do something for long enough, it becomes conditioned into our mind. And then eventually it just becomes subconscious. We don't even think about it. Something happens, there's a trigger, there's a stimulus, it immediately registered, and then we react to it. And our reaction to that thing is going to be what our habit or our routine or behavioral pattern is. And a very quick example, your alarm goes off in the morning. You either habitually click snooze or you habitually get up and start your day. And that's a very deeply ingrained, conditioned habit that all of us have. How we get up in the morning is a very deeply ingrained behavioral pattern. So we have those in every part of our lives. And the reason that's so important is our standards create our habits, but our habits create our lives. What we do habitually, day in and day out, is what builds our lives. And so if we have a lot of unhealthy habits, well, we can predict what our future will look like, because it's just going to be whatever those habits end up resulting in, day in, day out, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. That's going to be our future. So this is the secret. If you want to improve your life, your career, your finances, your health, whatever area of your life that you want to improve, know that there's going to be 2 things that have to change, and one of them comes first. Standards come first, and then the second thing that has to change is going to be the habits. So now let's talk about 4 main qualities that all of us need to build in order to be able to lead ourselves and eventually receive opportunities and be able to lead other people, whether at the team level or at the organizational level. So, and also how we can think about these personal qualities is none of us are born with these. And we can think of them as in the exact same way that we have to train a physical muscle where we go to the gym X number of times a week and we have to eat healthy and do these things consistently over the long term in order to build that muscle. It's the exact same way of how we think about these core personality traits or these core qualities. So in terms of courage, courage, discipline, faith, and patience are the 4. And we'll go courage, discipline, faith, and patience. So starting with courage, think of courage as it's doing something even if you're afraid. It's doing something even if there's uncertainty. And the reason we need to be able to develop this is because for any organization or team or long-term project, anything that's really worthwhile, that's very valuable, it's going to take a long time to build. And it's also going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to be very hard. And so with that comes risk. And risk means potential for failure, potential to be judged by other people. There's going to be self-doubt. So all of these negative kind of emotions start coming up. And because of that, a lot of people immediately decide not to do it. They take the easier path. And so what we need to do is consistently get ourselves to say, okay, I'm going to do it. I don't know how it'll turn out, but I'm going to give it a try. And that is consistently building the muscle of courage. But then once we start doing something, then we have to have discipline. And discipline is, going back to the previous section, it's standards. It's saying to ourselves, I have fully committed. It is an absolute must that this thing will happen, that I will do this thing regardless of the outcome, regardless of what happens. And it's getting ourselves day after day after day to do what we told ourselves we would do. And oftentimes, these are things that most other people don't want to do. And that's because they're hard, they're difficult, and they're uncertain. And they're very long-term focused. So discipline is, think of that as you're doing things that most other people won't do. And when we do that consistently over the long term, we're going to get the results. Also, because we're going to build the habit. Discipline turns into habit. Habits, again, over the long term, determine our lives. So the third part is faith. And I don't mean faith in terms of a spiritual sense, although it can definitely be a very strong portion of it, as it is for me. But for a lot of people, faith could just mean self-belief. Having faith that if I do the work, if I put in and do what I told myself I would do, it will work out in the long term. And if it doesn't work now, it's going to work the second time. If it doesn't work the second time, I have faith, it'll work the third time. And it's having that belief that every single time I'm getting better, I'm consistently learning, and if I keep applying myself, I'm choosing to believe that this thing will work out. And there's a lot of people that don't have the long-term faith or the long-term self-belief that if I keep going, it'll work. I'll figure it out. And so again, that is a muscle. It's something that has to be built and cultivated over the long term through trial and error. Because faith is, we don't just wake up one day and say, all right, everything's going to work out. It's a mindset that has to be developed day after day after day. And then the very last part is patience. And patience goes hand in hand with faith, that just because we want something to happen doesn't mean it's going to work out exactly how we want it to. So maybe the first time doesn't work, or the second, or the third, or 1 through 100 times. It's whatever it is that we're trying to do. If it really is difficult, it is long-term, but it is worthwhile. We need to know that in order for us to achieve this thing, we need to become the type of person, or the skilled enough person, or the experienced person who's capable of doing that thing. Well, that's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of effort. And most people will give up on a long-term dream or a long-term goal because it's either too hard, or they give up faith, halfway through or a quarter of the way through, and they haven't allowed themselves the time to just say, have patience with yourself. It'll work out, but it's going to take time. You're not perfect. You're not supposed to figure it out immediately. This thing will take time. So these 4 qualities will absolutely change your life in every major part of your life, because these 4 transcend everything and they transfer to everything. So now the 4th part of self-leadership is talking about iterative evolution and persistence. And in terms of iterative evolution, it doesn't only just apply to us, it applies to everything that we do. Because we're going to have to iterate and evolve ourselves, but also anything that we're focused on achieving is also going to go through an iterative evolution process. And so you can think of an iterative evolution process as we try something, we learn from it, we grow, we try again, we learn, we try again, and we consistently build over a long-term period of time. And just in terms of evolution in the sense that we're all aware of, I mean, human evolution, or the evolution of a species, or the evolution of a company. You can see over the long term how that company or species or thing developed over a long term, and it always went through kind of 4 main steps. And so the first part is the initial strategy, or the initial attempt of something. And so that initial strategy, and in this sense, let's just use business as an example. So we could have an initial strategy, and then we take action on it. We get results. What was the outcome of this initial strategy? And then we get feedback, which is us observing the results, trying to distill why did this work or why did this not work, take away lessons, and then through those lessons, we then recreate the next strategy, kind of the second attempt, and then we do the exact same thing. We take action, we get results, we learn from the feedback, and then we create the third strategy, and we keep iterating. So if you're familiar with Ray Dalio's work, he actually talks about his 5 loops, but this is at a very high level. The way that we can think about this for ourselves is we're going to have skills, knowledge, experience, or things that we want to achieve in our lives, and we're going to have to start with an initial strategy. And so going back to think about the 12-month commitments, well, in terms of trying to achieve a big, hefty commitment in 12 months, well, we need to start somewhere. And that starting somewhere is figuring out, okay, well, how do I think I can do this? And without doing, hundreds of hours of trying to figure out the best strategy in the world, it's what do I know so far? With what I know, I'm going to create my initial strategy and I'm going to give that a try. And by giving it a try, you're going to take action and then you're going to accelerate how quickly you get results. And with those results, you can then distill down what worked and what didn't work, so then we can get a better strategy faster. So in terms of this evolution process for ourselves or for our businesses or for our teams, whatever it is that we're doing or focused on, it's what we want to do is take this evolution time frame and we want to be able to compress it down into very quick iterations. The faster we iterate and the more times that we iterate, the better the strategy. And so whatever it is in your life that you want to achieve, it's the faster you do it and you try and you fail and you get results and then you can learn from it and then you consistently iterate, your life, your career, the evolution process that you're going to undergo is going to be a lot greater because you're doing it faster. So then there's the final part, which is until. And what I mean by until is when someone says you got to have persistence, all that really means is we're choosing to do something and we're choosing to not give up, not give in until I figure it out, until I reach X time frame, or until I've tried X number of times, or until we've maxed out the budget, until something. But the most important part is knowing that we're choosing our standards that we've set for ourselves. We're choosing to not give up or not stop trying until some predetermined time frame or some type of a restriction or something that we've predetermined for ourselves in the future. Or it might just be until I succeed. It is, I will do this until I figure it out. So now the fifth main part of self-leadership that we're going to talk about, and the final part, is internal motivation and resilience. And I want to quickly talk about internal motivation versus external motivation. So growing up as kids and then eventually if we do go to college and get educated and then go to a corporation or a business where we have a manager, a team leader, whatever, it's for decades we've been told what to do, why we need to do it, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it. And even in sports, we have a coach that tells us, all right, this is what we want you to do. And then as a team, all the players go and do that thing. And sometimes you have the sports coach, or you have the parent or the professor or the teacher. It's you have someone else telling you what to do and how to do it and why it's important. And what that means is all of that is external. It's not coming from you. It's coming from someone else. And the problem with that is we will never, ever have someone else there 24/7 for our entire lives. And these external influences will come and go. And I'm sure that those people will have a lasting impact. But in terms of the in-the-moment motivation, having someone kind of in your ear, well, it might be negative emotions, but it's still motivating. So we can be motivated in both a good way to be pulled towards something because we want to do it, or we can also be negatively motivated, which is something that's painful or horrible, and we don't want something to happen, and so we move away from it. And we're willing to do things to make sure that thing doesn't happen, whatever that bad outcome is. So internal motivation is when we don't need anyone else or anything else to get us to do what we need to do. And the single biggest way that we can build internal motivation is through knowing exactly what we want and why it's important to us. And that is, a lot of people don't have goals. They don't have dreams. They don't have visions for what they want. And they also, in terms of standards, they're comfortable. They're complacent. And so we can only be motivated one of two ways. Either in a positive way, we want to go towards something, or in a negative way. Something's painful and we don't want this thing and we move away from it. And we need to figure out what is it that I want. And what do I want for my life, for my career, for my relationships, for my health, for my finances, for my spirituality, in terms of pleasure or fun or self-expression And then in terms of the why, we want to figure out why in a good sense. Like, if I do this, what will that mean to me? What will happen in my life? What will happen in my relationships? Like, painting what are the benefits of if I make this thing happen? If I achieve this, what? What are the benefits? But then we also want to ask ourselves, if I don't do this, if I do not achieve this, what? If I do not achieve this outcome, what will happen in terms of my life? And usually that is going to mean nothing changes. Our lives a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now are going to look the same, if not worse. And so that's a pretty powerful motivator, because then we can think about, if I choose not to do this thing, that means that my life will be the same a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or my health will be the same a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And that is a powerful why. So we want both a positive why and a negative why in terms of why we must achieve this what. And so now these parts, in terms of resilience, so internal validation. Think of resilience as something is very difficult and there's going to be a lot of fear, frustration. You're going to get upset. There's going to be tons of uncertainty, risk, just a lot of testing of your personal willpower, of your discipline, of your faith, of your courage, of all these personal qualities. Resilience is consistently applying those internal qualities against something that is very challenging personally. And so internal validation, how we can think about that is, we do not need someone else to tell us we're good, or we're strong, or it will work out, or that we are worthy, or that we are valuable contributors to something, or that our goals are worthwhile, worth pursuing, or that our dream is possible or doable or reasonable or realistic. And so what happens is, most people are not internal validators. They get validation from other people, from their family, from their friends. They need other people to validate their worth, their esteem, their success, their everything, their status. And so the moment we can make that shift to, it's not about what other people think. And I want to make another quick point here is, if we live our lives completely focused on what other people think, well, then that means that we're going to do roughly what everyone else does. And that means that if we do what everyone else does, we're going to get the exact same results. Our lives, our careers, our relationships, like whatever it is, it's going to be about the same as everyone else. And so if what we want, if our want, our what, is very totally different from what other people want, then we should not listen to them. Or maybe we listen to them and we hear what they have to say, but we cannot allow them to make the decisions that we need to make for our lives, our careers, our relationships, etc. We need to be able to listen to ourselves as well, and have the strength, the courage to be able to say, this is what's best for me in order to get to the what. And what I want is not the same as what other people want. And so I need to be able to validate myself and have the internal encouragement and the self-belief regardless of what other people say. And that kind of comes down to this point, is we need to be able to overcome not only personal failure, because we're going to try things that are not going to work out. And that's probably going to happen a lot, assuming you're trying to do something big or worthwhile or long-term or uncertain or risky. We're going to try a lot. Things are not going to work. That's okay. That's to be expected. That's how it works. But we need to be able to learn and iterate and grow and evolve through that. And a lot of people get stuck on the first or the second failure. But then the other thing is, we need to be able to overcome negative judgment from other people and criticism from other people. Every artist, every musician, every business person, every politician, every person in philanthropy, philanthropist, whatever you want to call it, every religious leader, every sect, everybody who does something different that goes against the majority is going to have kind of three groups of people. There's going to be the criticizers. There's going to be the people that are just totally indifferent. And then there's going to be the smaller group that believe, or that support, or that agree. And so it's, whenever we're trying to do something creative or different or difficult, you can rest assured that there's going to always be negative judgment, negative criticism, and just haters, if you will. There will always be those people, and it's to be expected, and we should know that we cannot let them get under our skin. But then the second part is we need to know that there's going to be a big group or an audience of people that they just quite frankly don't care. They could care less. And then the third part is the people that are, followers, or they agree, or supporters, believers, like whatever it is. And so when we have the internal validation and the foresight to know, one is we're going to fail. We have to overcome that. And then we also have to just ignore the people that are just totally against anything new or anything original. Well, that's okay. And then the very first part, or the last part of resilience, is focusing on step one. So whenever, and whether it's a creative process or something innovative, there's going to be a lot of steps that have to be done. And Tony Robbins and a lot of other people, they call it the tyranny of how. Why do most people not do what they want to do? And it's because they get stuck on the word how. How am I going to do that? How could I possibly do this thing? And if we are someone if we want to be a self-leader, we need to acknowledge the fact that we're not going to know everything. That's just not how life works, how business works, how careers work, like anything. We cannot have perfect information. And so rather than trying to figure out some unbelievable, 3, 5, 10, 20-year plan. Now note, I said plan, because earlier we talked about having a vision. We need to have a direction, a vision of what we're going. And companies do the exact same thing. They have a long-term vision. Examples would be Elon Musk with SpaceX and kind of his vision, his 20, 30, 40, like this long-term vision of we will colonize Mars. Or Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He had a 15-year vision. Or Reed Hastings with Netflix. He had a vision, 15 years in the future that, all right, we're shipping out DVDs in the mail now, but 15 years from now, everything's going to be digital. It's going to be streaming. People are going to be watching movies in their homes. All of those people had visions, but they didn't have perfect step-by-step 20-year plans because we can't. Too many things change. And so what we need to do for our lives in order to be leaders in our lives or careers, whatever, we need to just focus on step one. Because if we can achieve step one through trial and error, then we can learn from that, achieve it, and then we move on to step two, and then step three, and then so we take it piece by piece by piece, and by doing that, we don't feel overwhelmed by all of the crazy, all of the effort and work that has to get done. We just say, okay, what must happen first? I'm going to focus on that. I will do that. And then once that's achieved, then we ask ourselves, okay, what's next? And we take it day by day, week by week, month by month, and we build and build and build. So to wrap up this video on self-leadership, I want to give you one primary takeaway from everything that we've covered. So only when we can lead ourselves will we receive the opportunity to lead other people. It has to start with us, and then other people will eventually recognize or see that you're doing what you set off to do. You're sticking to your standards. You're making progress. You're winning. You're leading. You're achieving. And it's through taking action that other people are going to start recognizing that. And once it's being recognized, what that does is you build a reputation of being someone who's capable of doing this thing. And if other people can see that you can do it yourself, well, all of a sudden you lead by example. And so then other people will be willing to extend leadership opportunities to you because they say, hey, you seem exceptionally capable. You've been able to achieve this, this, and this, and this. Would you be willing to lead a group of people to do that? And now all of a sudden you transfer to team leadership, which is going to be the topic of the video for next week. So thanks so much for listening. I come out with these videos every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern. I encourage you to check out my website or my LinkedIn page. I'm a professional coach, and my mission is to coach and train 10,000 people to build their dreams and achieve their greatest potential. And that means that we need to focus on all the areas of our lives. We need to focus on life, performance, career, wealth, and also leadership and communication. So I will see you next week and have an amazing, amazing week.